Hi everyone, welcome to this video. What I'm going to be doing today is giving you a quick guide on how to assemble and paint the Wargames Atlantic plastic mounted knights. Bit of a mouthful, I know. It's part of their Age of Chivalry range alongside the plastic foot knights, the levy and the sergeants and mounted sergeants. What I've done for these is I've bought a pack of 4 knights off eBay, mainly just to have a go at assembling them, painting them and seeing how they turn out. Spoiler alert, I really love the models and I love how they've turned out, so that's a big plus from me. One thing I will say is that I wish I had painted the horses partially before I assembled them. You'll see when I put them together that they form together to form a whole piece, but to actually get behind the horse's comparison to paint is very difficult, so I do wish I'd painted that first before gluing them together. They are different to the metals in that the proportions are slightly larger in some aspects, but the way the horses assemble and the way they look together, I really think works well. They also are fully interchangeable with parts when it comes to the foot knights, so you can swap and change weapons as and when you want to. What I've done for this project is I've actually done a little bit of research, which I will take you through, to try and pick some historical characters that I can paint these knights as. This is mainly so that when I'm playing games of the Barons' War, I can pick some either loyalist or rebel knights to lead my retinues, or just to make the retinues look more realistic. I'll be posting some pictures at the end so you can see how the project went. So I hope you enjoy this video. If you do, please like, comment and subscribe.
Get on with it! Yes, get on with it!
So let's have a closer look at the horses themselves. So of course, because I didn't buy a whole box, I only got 1 sprue of horses, and that's enough for me to make 4 figures, which for the minute as a bit of a test is great. If I like it, then I can always buy more. So these go together very nicely, and I have to say actually the way that the Wargames Atlantic make their plastic horses is fantastic in my opinion. So I've also put together some of their light horse, which I think they're not specific to the Barons' War range, but they're the same horses you get with the mounted sergeants. But if you look in here, you can see that actually they've got separate reins, whereas a lot of metal or plastic figures would normally just completely and utterly make the reins a single bit of material. Now this works quite cleverly because of the way that they go together and that the heads and the reins connect. So on the sprue you get the halves of each horse, so you snip these off, clean them up, and they glued together. You get a tail, which you would just put a dab of glue on the end of the tail, slot it in, and hold it in place for a couple of seconds, and that fits there. What you then get is you have to get the headpiece, which consists of the horse's head and neck and the top half of the jaw. You would then get the corresponding, so this is D1. You'd find the corresponding bridle piece, which is here, D2. This contains the reins, as you can see there, and the bottom half of the jaw. So if I take this off, this part here forms the bottom half of the jaw. So I'll just take the other bit of the head off and slot them together so you can see what I mean. So here we go. Here is the horse head. Here is the rein. The way it works is that this protruding section would slot into a groove in the horse's neck area. The head fits onto the flat area, and essentially you create the horse's face like that. See? So once it's all glued together, you've got realistic looking reins in a very, very secure fashion. So I'll do a little bit of a quick speed thing so you can see how the horse goes together start to finish. Right, so let's pick up. These 2 halves stick together as so. Slot the 2 halves together. There is the hole for the tail. blob of glue onto the plug into the hole, hold it in place because it will, if you let it droop, it will droop down on its own. Over to the head, and I like to place glue underside of the neck and then a little bit of glue onto where the reins will connect. And then, as we did a moment ago, now this you do have to be careful and to that the reins on the neck and the chin even, sorry, line up nicely. Then a bit of glue on each side, a bit of glue on the top of the dome, a bit of glue on the corresponding socket. That's essentially it. There's your horse done. So very nice, very easy to go together. And all in all, I think I could probably assemble all 4 horses in about 20 minutes. So now looking at the actual sprue of knights itself, as I said, only bought 1 sprue, so I got this and I got the sprue of horses for about £12 on eBay. Now I've got enough here to create 4 knights, so I've got the 4 main torsos. Each torso has a corresponding saddle piece, so these are sort of like the mantle of the saddle, the front and back. They slot between the legs there. You've then also got a very big selection of heads, so you've got some tournament style heads with animals on the top. So there's what looks like some sort of like maybe perhaps a lion, a pig, that might be a female lion, or perhaps maybe a leopard. You've got a male lion there. You've got a pig. You've got sort of like a what are they called? It's like a braid, sort of like that goes around the head. You've got a bull's head here, which is quite cool. But what I like, my preference is for these earlier styles of helmets. You have got like a great helm here. You've got sort of like faceplate helm. Good selection of heads on here. You've got armoured arms, which I suppose would be useful. So there's some shield arms. So this one here is a shield arm, as you can see by the strap. You get a number of shields. I will say the number of weapons seems to be smaller than the Foot Knights kit, but they are interchangeable. So you've got a mace, you've got a selection of swords, you've got lances, you've got tournament lances as well if you wanted to use these for jousting sets. You've got a axe there, and you've got another number of swords in their scabbards. What I will say you do not have is a horseman's pick, which you do get in the Foot Knight set. So it's a bit of a shame not to see it in the mounted set, because they have changed the rules so that only mounted knights get a horseman's pick. So it's back to front that you get it in the Foot Knight set, but you don't get it in the mounted knight set. But that said, you've got a good choice of weapons here. You've got one as well that could be used, well, you've got a couple even, that could be used as banners, which is one of the things I want to do. I want to create a mounted banner. So I'll take a couple of bits apart, put them together and show you how it all works. So here are the component parts for our mounted knight, minus the shield. I do like to keep the shield separate if I can. So first things first, let's fit this part of the saddle. So open up our glue. I'm going to put a dab of glue between his legs. The higher part of the saddle goes to the rear. I believe it's called the mantle, I think it is, or the cantle. Can't remember. The idea being that when a knight charges and they hit their target with a lance, the force is transferred into the saddle and then into the horse, so that the knight can hopefully remain in the saddle. So that goes into there. I will then put on the left arm, and I do like to set, like I say, I have dry fitted these, and I know I am coming into a bit of an issue in a minute, so let's get this fitted. And the issue I know I'm going to have is that this lance, when put onto here, when it sits flat, would go where the horse actually needs to be. So I need to shape the top of the shoulder ever so slightly with my scalpel, just to make that lance sit upright, because this is going to be a bannerman. So I'll do that quickly and then come back. Right, so after a little bit of shaving, I've managed to reshape the top of the male here so that it actually, that's how he'll sit on the horse. I've then got the head to add, and I've gone for a middle of the era sort of helmet with a faceplate on it, reminiscent a bit of the Stormcloaks out of Skyrim for anyone who's played that, the helmets they have, but I do really like these ones. And he'll sit on his horse like this. Only one thing left to do will be his sword, which will go onto the belt here, and then eventually a shield. But I do paint my shields separately, so that won't be going on anytime soon until I've at least decided on the heraldry for this guy, what colour he's going to be. There's been some fantastic examples on the Facebook group, so I'm going to be scouring that for a bit of inspiration, I think. I'll get the others assembled and then we'll start looking at how we would paint them. So here they are, primed and ready to go. I've primed them in a couple of different colours this time. I've done a white, I've done 2 of them in black, and I've done 1 in a grey. And that's mainly because I'm going to try and do some slightly different paint schemes with these. So for one of them I want a light base coat, a couple of the others dark base coat is fine, and then finally the fourth one, sorry, I'm not sure what I want to do yet. I want to try paint these as some historical characters. So before I start with them, I'll let you know which historical character I'm aiming for, and I'll give you a quick sort of like overview of what their colours and heraldry would have been like. But these spray painted up nice and easily. Try something a bit different this time. I've drilled holes in the bottom and shoved cocktail sticks in so that I can hold them more comfortably. Usually I try when I'm painting cavalry models to hold them by the feet, which doesn't always work. So we'll see how it goes. I've just got some spare blue foam that I'm poking it into. The horses, I've primed 2 different colours, 1 grey, 1 white. Again, any lighter colours I will use the white base coat, anything slightly darker I'll use the grey, but I don't often find it makes much difference. So I'll let you know what historical characters I'm planning on painting these up as, and we'll get started. So I've done a bit of research, trying to work out who I want to depict these knights as. I'd like to have a good mix of rebels and loyalists. I'd also, if possible, like to keep the designs as simple as possible. I've managed to whittle it down, and I've picked 4 who I'm going to use, but I wanted to show you some of the sources I've used to find information about these individuals. And of course I've used Wikipedia, I've used some other internet sources as well, but these are the 2 that have been the most useful for me. So the first is this Wappen Wiki, and this is like a Wikipedia page of coats of arms. And you can see here they've got Europe, Anatolia, the Holy Land, got Britain here, Outremer further down, and it's a great source where they pull together original sources. As you can see here, they'll tell you the sources they've used, and they'll put it into a way that can be used, regular people like us. So this one is based on the Magna Carta itself. So it tells you the councillors named in the Magna Carta. Of course, you've got Stephen Langton, you've got Peter de Roche, you've got William Marshall, you've got the Master of the Knights Templar in England, John Marshall, William Marshall's son. Then you've got the Council of 25 Barons. It gives you a bit more information about their heraldry. And of course, this heraldry is relatively simple. It wasn't until the sort of like the Second Barons' War and the end of the 13th century where it started to develop more into the sort of heraldry that we would see nowadays, with lots of different animals and different combinations, very much in its infancy at this point. They've also, interestingly, got details about the witnesses to the will of King John, which I have found useful because I've struggled a bit to actually, of course, by the end of the Barons' War, things were going so badly for John that he'd pretty much been abandoned by everyone. So being able to pick out these means that it's given me some ideas of loyalist barons that I can include as well. Now, another source, and unfortunately I wish I could remember who posted this, but for the life of me I can't. It was posted on the Barons' War Facebook page, and someone's made a spreadsheet listing coats of arms, who they belong to, where they were sort of like in the First Barons' War, the titles they held, how they were involved in the Barons' War, so whether they're on the Council of Barons, whether they were a witness to King John's will. They've also then got details for who would have held that title during the Second Barons' War, and then, if applicable, later in the War of the Roses. And this is very similar to this, only it's got a lot more on here, and you can scroll through and find out a bit more information about who was who. So, for example, we can see, you've got Richard de Clare, you've got William Marshall here, you've got, who else can I see? Stephen Langton, so it also includes religious titles, Peter de Roche, a few more, but it's all very interesting. There's lots of ideas on here. So councillors named in the Magna Carta, witness to the will of King John. It's very useful. You've got the Knights Hospitaller, you've got some military orders here, and it continues and continues. It's very, very useful, and it's even got like the Plantagenet and different royal coats of arms as well. Of course, these more relevant to later periods, for example, the Second Barons' War and the War of the Roses. So, who have I picked? Who are the lucky men who will be immortalised on my tabletop? So first off, I've gone for William de Fours. So he was a rebel baron. He was one of the Council of 25 barons. He betrayed and rejoined King John multiple different times. So for someone who's wargaming the period, this is a really useful character to have, because you can include him in either a rebel or a loyalist army. It doesn't matter. Next up, we've got Sayre de Quincy. So he was again on the Council of 25 barons. He was a rebel, and he was actually captured at the Battle of Lincoln. So I've already got a William Marshall painted up, so I'll be able to use this guy to fight in battles against him around that sort of period. The third is Thomas, Count of Perche. He was a French count who served with Prince Louis, and he was actually killed at the Battle of Lincoln. And when he died, he was only 22 years old, a relative youngster compared to William Marshall, who of course was leading the baronial forces during the battle. The last one I've picked is William de Ferrers. So he was the Earl of Ferrers, I think it's pronounced Ferrers, and Derby. He fought with William Marshall at Lincoln as well. So a good variation there of 2 loyalists, 2 rebels, and relatively simple coats of arms that I should be able to reproduce without too much fuss. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead, start making some progress on these knights, and come back and show you when I've got a bit done. So generally speaking, when I'm painted armoured miniatures like knights, I like to start with the metallics. And the first coat is always a very dark coat of a sort of like a metallic steel colour. So for this, I've used the Vallejo model colour Oily Steel, which is quite a dark steel colour with black in as well. And it's about a 50-50 mix. And I go over everywhere where you're going to get metals on a model. So with these guys, it'll be the chainmail, it'll be the tips of the weapons, spurs, and then any helmets, or even the hilts of the swords there. Now, you can see the difference, actually, between painting this on white versus painting this on black. And it's quite tricky for the black one, because it does look quite dark. So I probably use about a 50-50 mix on here, and probably about a sort of like a 60-40 mix on here, just so that I was actually getting some of the steel colour coming through as well. Then after that, what I do is I give it a wash of Army Painter Dark Tone, which is not dissimilar to Nuln Oil, and it just really sort of like, it knocks the colours back a bit more, makes them a bit more matte, a bit more muted, and it gives you a good base coat for the next step, which is to apply a dry brush. So the reason I do all of this before I move on to anything else is because if I were to go ahead now and, for example, paint some of the colours on the tabards here, I would then want to go and dry brush over this with a silver, which is what I'm going to do next. That will get onto the other cloth colours, and it can be quite horrible to look at and realise that actually you've got a metallic colour dry brush over your base coat, and it can be a bit annoying. So what I do now is I'm going to get my Vallejo silver, and I'm just simply going to dry brush over them, and I'll show you quickly how that changes the model. So dry brushing, like with anything else, this is virtually dry. I've put it in the water and I've wiped it to within an inch of its life. A tiny little bit of moisture is not a bad thing. Dab it into paint, wipe most of it off, and then you'll be able to see that as I dry brush over this, it gets much brighter. So you can kind of see on the helmet there, getting brighter but retaining the details. So I'll just go over this and do this gently on all of them, and then I'll show you how they're looking. So now I've given them all a dry brush, you can see the difference it will make. They are much shinier. The metallic colours are much brighter. Now, also, as you can see, like I said, I've got this all over the his tabard, all over the tunic area. So that's why I do this first before I move on to that, especially on knights. This helps keep them a little bit cleaner. In addition, I've also started the horses. Here, what I've done is I've just applied some basic colours onto the animals themselves. You can see I'm going to go for a beige one. I'm going to go for a sort of like a dark, very dark brown, almost black colour. I've got a brown and this is another grey. These have just been block colours added on. I've put a wash onto the horses, so I've used a soft tone for the beige, I've used strong tone for the brown, and then I've used that dark tone, the same dark tone for the black horses. And for this one, I've also started painting his comparison. So, small steps, but what I'll start doing next is I'll start blocking in some of the colours on these knights to reflect who they are going to be representing. So I've made a bit more progress on these guys. For the ones wearing red, I've just given them, so far I've given them a base coat of just Vallejo red. It took a couple of thin coats as this one was primed in grey. The horse went on much easier because of course it was primed with the Wraithbone, and they come out quite nice. They'll need a wash, so what I'll do next is I'll give them a wash, probably 50-50 strong tone and red tone, just to give the recesses a bit more detail, and then I'll need to start highlighting those. For the ones with yellow on them, I started these off with a Vallejo Iraqi sand, simply because painting yellow onto anything can be a true pain in the arse. So I start off with the Iraqi sand, and then I just gradually mix in a little bit of Vallejo. This is flat yellow, flat yellow, and game color sun yellow, just to give it a little bit more, vibrancy to the yellow. And after that, I give them both a very thin coat of soft tone, just to try and put a bit of shadow back in. So you can see the yellow is starting to look quite nice on the horses as well. It works. I think I probably should prime these with the Wraithbone as well, so that the yellow would have covered better. But, you know, it's one of those things where I went ahead and primed everything, then realised actually wrong colour. The final one who I'm working on is the one who here is currently white. So I touched up the white paint on both him and the horse, and then again I've given that a thin wash with soft tone. I'd say it's probably 60-40 water to wash, so it's very, very thin. And I even went round as this was drying on the horse, and with a paper towel just wiped off some of the higher areas to try and retain that white a little bit. So next up, it's going to be, for the red guys, it'll be a wash, and then for the rest of them, it's going to be start picking out some of the details. So I've been making some nice progress since I last filmed the section for this. The horses have all now been completely highlighted. I've done the details on the saddles, the saddlecloth, and the reins. I've got to come back in, I've got to finish off some of the eye details. I've got to highlight the saddlecloth a little bit more. Each of them have been roughly done in the colour of the heraldry that I'll be painting them up in. So they're ready now more for a bit of detail. Really enjoying how these are painting up so far. The yellows have come out well, considering I wasn't too sure about my initial decision to undercoat them grey. After I finish everything, I'll be adding sort of like weathering at the bottom, so like brown stains almost to sort of like simulate mud that the comparisons would have dragged through. I'm really enjoying this white horse actually, and how the shading and the highlighting of the cloth has gone on that one. The riders, it's been highlighted as well, so we've done a bit more work here on actually painting finishing off their tabards, getting those painted, paint some detail on the belts, both parts of the saddle which are visible, and then of course the weapons. This guy very much the same, putting the details on the scabbards, putting the details onto the shafts of the weapons, and same with this one. I will highlight the shafts of the weapons. I also want to add some gold detailing to some of the helmets. So everything highlighted. It started the cap, so the arming cap, that's been painted, washed and highlighted. And I'm going to start on the face next. So I've used a base coat of mahogany brown, and then I've used white to just outline where the eyes will be. To the mahogany brown, I'll then add successive layers, and for all very thin layers of I've got a basic skin tone from Vallejo, and then also I've got a white that I tend to use. So I normally just mix in a little bit of off-white as well into that basic skin tone just to highlight it. But he's the only one who's got any flesh on show, so it won't take long to get his face done. So what I'll do is I'll paint all these, get them all done, and here are the 4 finished models. But since the last update, I've gone ahead, I've painted their heraldry, I've added a bit of dirt on battle damage to the shields and the horses' caparisons, and then obviously I've completed the basing. So I'll take you through them one by one so you can see how I've approached each. So first off, Thomas, Count of Perche, not sure how to pronounce that one. He died at the Battle of Lincoln fighting for Prince Louis's army, but his heraldry is these sort of like 3 chevrons, red on a white background. So I've just painted those freehand. I tried to use some masking tape, but it didn't really work very well because of the shape of the moulding. And then I added a bit of battle damage using a dry brush, dabbing or stabbing on some chocolate brown and then some Iraqi sand onto the bottom there. Did the same at the bottom of his tabard, and then also a bit on the shield. And then the shield battle damage was done with very, very fine strokes of black paint, and then little fine strokes of beige as well. So I like how he's turned out. So this one, I believe, is the Fours. So he's got this almost like toothpaste, white and red, or barber pole kind of style. So again, painted this freehand across the horse's comparison and on his tabard. This was a bit of a pain to try and get them at a sort of like a consistent angle and a consistent thickness. And then again, same method for adding a bit of weathering to the bottom of the horse, and then of course the shield, just to make it look like they're mid-battle. Do like this one, quite nice. I might have to remind myself who he served and what happened with him. Then we got Sire de Quincy, and again I've added the red band across the middle of his, and then he's got these almost like these dark blue bands with bits that drop down. And so I've kind of just freehanded these, and again added some dirt and then battle damage for him. Really like how this one's turned out. Very happy with this. And then finally, I think this is the Ferrers. Now I've decided not to try and repeat this pattern onto the horse's comparison, simply because it was such a pain. So when I paint gold patterns like this, I like to start with a sort of earth coloured brown. Then I go for a beige, so like a Iraqi sand is my favourite go-to. And then the very last coat is the gold, because if you go just straight for gold, sometimes you can see the base color underneath it. So if you've got the brown and the beige there already, then what you're seeing through it effectively is close to the gold anyway. But I don't want to have to try replicate this at least 2 or 4 times across the horse's comparison. So the horse is just plain red, but he's got the detail there on his shield. I'm very happy with how the face came out on this one. Really nice finish, I think. And then same again for the damage and the dirt. So that's it for these 4. Now, Wargames Atlantic have teased that they will be releasing a command upgrade for knights that can be used for foot knights and mounted knights. So I might well try and get some more of these. I'm also quite tempted by the Victrix mounted knights. They look very nice as well. I'm gonna end up with too many knights, which is the truth. But I like painting them; they're fun. They're a bit different to what I would paint normally, and they look good. So, thank you for watching. I'll slot these guys into their movement tray, as this is how I store them in my cabinet, and hopefully they'll be gracing a battlefield on the channel soon at some point. So thank you for watching, and I hope you found this short-ish video useful. Cheers, bye.